On the coldest morning of the year, with snow falling like quiet ash and frost crawling across the windows, 7-year-old Lila Collins spotted a frail, shivering dog curled beneath a maple tree in her front yard. His fur was matted with ice, his ribs pressed sharply beneath the skin, and his eyes, distant and dull, barely registered movement. He didn't bark. He didn't run. He just lay there, as if waiting for the cold to take him. Lila stood frozen at the window, heart pounding. The wind howled outside, and her mother's voice called from the kitchen, warning her not to open the door. But something pulled her, a force beyond reason. She flung on her scarf and boots, ran through the snow, and knelt beside the dog. Without fear or hesitation, she wrapped her scarf around his body and whispered, "I've got you." Then she lifted him, cradled like a baby, and carried him into the warmth of home. Unaware this act of kindness would change everything. Inside the warm house, chaos met compassion. As soon as Lila stepped to the door with a half-frozen dog in her arms, her mother gasped and her father dropped his coffee mug. But shock quickly gave way to urgency. Her mom grabbed towels from the linen closet. Her dad fetched blankets from the couch, and together they laid the dog by the heater, wrapping him up gently but firmly. His paws were cracked, his fur crusted with dried blood and dirt. Deep scratches covered his legs and side, and every rib showed through his skin like branches under snow. Lila knelt beside him, her small hand resting on his trembling paw. She whispered softly, over and over, "You're safe now. You're safe now." Her parent exchanged glances, concern, confusion, and something unspoken. There was a strange calm in the way Lila looked at him, as if they were already connected. Without delay, they bundled the dog into the car and drove through the icy streets toward the nearest vet, praying they weren't too late. At the veterinary clinic, the air was thick with worry as Dr. Karen Lynn gently examined the frail dog laid out on the table. She cleaned his wounds, checked his vitals, and then ran a scan for a microchip, more out of routine than expectation. But then the scanner beeped. Dr. Lynn paused, looked at the screen, then back at the dog. "He's chipped," she said, eyebrows raised. "His name is Boomer." Lila's parents leaned in, stunned. Dr. Lynn continued, "He was reported missing over a year ago from a town 5 towns over. His owner listed him as stolen during a break-in." The room fell silent. Boomer, the broken, freezing dog they found in the snow, had a name, a past, and someone who once loved him. Dr. Lynn made the call. On the other end, a woman's voice cracked. Grace Mallory couldn't believe it. "Boomer? He's alive." Her sobs echoed through the phone. "I thought he was gone forever." The next morning, a car pulled into the Collins driveway. Grace Mallory stepped out slowly, her hands trembling, eyes wide with hope and fear. Lila stood at the door, Boomer beside her, still weak but alert. The moment Grace entered, Boomer's ears perked up. His tail gave a weak, uneven wag, the first sign of joy anyone had seen from him. He struggled to stand, legs wobbling, and took a few shaky steps toward her. Grace dropped to her knees, tears pouring down her cheeks as she gathered him into her arms. "Boomer," she whispered, voice cracking. "My sweet boy." But as she held him, she noticed something that made her heart ache even more. Boomer kept glancing at Lila. When Grace loosened her hold, he limped back to the little girl, pressing into her legs, resting his head against her. Grace watched silently. She had waited over a year for this moment. Boomer was hers. But in that quiet exchange between girl and dog, she saw something powerful, something that left her torn. She thanked the family sincerely, but didn't say whether she'd be taking him home. Not yet. Later that night, after dinner and a round of gentle medication from the vet, Lila sat on the living room rug beside Boomer, brushing through his tangled, dirt-caked fur with slow, careful strokes. She hummed softly, a melody only she and Boomer seemed to understand. But then her fingers paused. Hidden beneath a thick clump of matted hair around his neck, she felt something metallic. She parted the fur and gasped. It was a small, rusted chain looped like a makeshift collar, nearly fused into his coat. At the end hung a dull metal tag. Her father fetched a flashlight, and when they held it close, the inscription came into view. Asterisk Unit 42, Blackwood Storage. Asterisk it wasn't part of his original collar. and it definitely didn't belong to Grace. Lila's parents immediately called her. When Grace arrived and saw the tag, her face turned pale. That was the name of the facility she suspected the burglars had used. The break-in at her home had left no leads, until now. Together, they called the police and reported the strange find. It was the first real clue in a case long thought to be unsolvable. When the police arrived at Blackwood Storage and opened Unit 42, what they found stunned everyone. Inside were stacks of boxes, dusty, sealed, and filled with items that clearly didn't belong to one person. Jewelry, electronics, photographs, and old military memorabilia lined the shelves. Among them were Grace's missing heirlooms, her grandmother's locket, her husband's military medals, and even a journal she thought lost forever. But that wasn't all. Investigators quickly realized the unit held stolen property from multiple unsolved burglaries across several towns. The pieces finally fit together. It appeared that on the night of the robbery, Boomer had chased the intruders, possibly tracking them all the way to the storage unit. Somehow, in the chaos, he becomes separated, injured, and lost, surviving on his own for nearly a year. His miraculous return and the rusted tag he carried had uncovered a web of crimes that no one had been able to solve until now. Grace returned a few days later, her eyes softer but heavy with thought. She watched from the doorway as Boomer lay with his head in Lila's lap, eyes closed, completely at peace. Lila gently stroked his fur, whispering stories to him, just as she had the day they met. Grace stood silently for a long moment before kneeling beside them. She reached out to Boomer, who greeted her with a slow tail wag, but didn't move from Lila's side. The decision in Grace's heart had already been made, not out of sadness, but clarity. "You saved him," she said, looking into Lila's wide, earnest eyes. "And maybe he saved you, too." Her voice cracked with emotion. "Boomer found you for a reason. He's yours now." Tears welled up, but she smiled through them. It wasn't easy letting go. Boomer had been her companion, her comfort, but seeing him with Lila, truly home, made it the most beautiful, selfless choice she could make. In the weeks that followed, Lila and Boomer became inseparable. Where Lila went, Boomer followed, his steps growing steadier, his eyes brighter, his tail wagging freely once more. He put on weight, his wounds healed, and the haunted look slowly vanished from his face. And Lila? She began to change, too. The quiet, shy girl who once hesitated to speak in class now carried herself with quiet strength and quiet pride. She took care of Boomer with the devotion of someone far beyond her years. People in town began sharing the story of the little girl who brought a dying dog in from the cold, and how that dog carried a secret that solved a long-forgotten crime. But for Lila, it was never about the headlines or the attention. To her, Boomer was a miracle, not because he led police to stolen treasures, but because he reminded her what love, trust, and courage looked like. That snowy morning hadn't just changed his life. It had changed hers forever.